They say a mother's love is the purest thing on earth. It is a fierce, unyielding light. But what happens when a shadow, shimmering and deceptive, convinces that light to turn its back on you? What happens when the very heart you nurtured decides you are surplus to requirements? My name is Emery. And this is the story of how a single, cunning woman didn't just break my family, she tried to erase me. My son, John, he was my whole world, my golden boy. From the moment he took his first breath, I dedicated my life to ensuring he had the kind of security and stability I never did. My late husband and I built a successful small business real estate investment. We weren't millionaires overnight, but we were comfortable, we were secure, and all of it, every single deed, every piece of property, was for John. John was kind, brilliant, and perhaps a little too trusting. He had an enormous heart, the kind that saw the best in everyone, even when I saw the red flags waving violently. The red flag arrived 7 years ago in the form of Serena. She walked into John's life at a corporate gala, a sleek, ambitious young woman with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was a master of performance. She'd look at John with a dizzying intensity, like he was the only source of light in her whole universe. To me, it felt like an act. It felt rehearsed. I tried to warn John. I pulled him aside gently at first. I told him, "She asks too many questions about your inheritance, son. She's too interested in the business accounts. There's a hunger in her eyes, and it's not for you, John. It's for what you represent. But love, or what he thought was love, is profoundly blinding." He dismissed me gently, saying, "Mom, you're just being protective. She's a driven woman. She's not after the money." He never saw her true color. He only saw the perfect facade she presented, the supportive partner, the attentive daughter-in-law to be. Their courtship was a whirlwind. She accelerated everything. An engagement ring within 6 months, a rushed wedding planned for the following year. Before I knew it, Serena had not only moved into John's life, but she had systematically started to replace every support system he had. His childhood friends, suddenly too negative. His favorite hobbies, a waste of time. And me, I became the nagging interference, the old woman who just didn't understand modern love. The day they married was not a celebration for me. It was a premonition of loss. I watched her glide down the aisle, her perfect white dress hiding the snake beneath, and I knew with a chilling certainty that I had just lost my son to a predator dressed in silk. The subtle emotional abuse began the moment they returned from the honeymoon. "Your mother needs to stop calling every day, John. Why is she still listed as an authorized signatory on the old investment accounts?" The conversations were always framed as concerns for John's peace of mind, but the message was clear. Emery was the problem. She needed to be removed. And John, my sweet, trusting boy, started listening. The golden light started to fade. That was just the beginning, the first crack in the dam. Little did I know, Serena's plan was far more devastating than mere distance. She wasn't content with controlling John's heart. She wanted to control his future, which was tied up in my careful planning. She was about to make her first bold move to take everything. Serena was already maneuvering behind the scenes, using John's love as a weapon. She needed access to the family's assets, and she found a way to bypass my authority using a single, shocking piece of paperwork. What was this document, and how did John's signature betray everything his father and I had worked for? The emotional distance Serena created between John and me quickly became a suffocating silence. My weekly calls went from immediate answers to polite, pre-scheduled slots that often felt like interviews. But the real game, the financial one, was being played behind the scenes, hidden by the newlywed bliss and John's complete and utter devotion. My late husband and I had always been careful with our wealth. Our real estate holdings, the multifamily units, the commercial rentals, the business park, were structured in a legally binding family trust. This was done to protect John, and eventually his children, from high taxes and, crucially, from bad decisions. I was the primary trustee, and John was named as the successor. The critical safeguard was the operating account for the entire portfolio. It required two signatures for any major transaction, mine and a secondary one, which had always been the trusted bank manager, Mr. Peterson. It was 6 months after the wedding when the first warning arrived. I received a cryptic, almost robotic letter from the bank. It was a standard account update, the kind you usually just recycle, but one line, hidden deep in the dense boilerplate text, jumped out at me like a physical blow. Acknowledgement of revised account, signatories and trustee amendment. Revised? My blood ran cold. No one had spoken to me about any revisions. John was never meant to touch the trust structure until I was completely retired, or, well, until I was gone. I drove straight to the bank. Mr. Peterson, who had handled our family accounts for 2 decades, looked immediately uncomfortable, almost guilty, when I walked into his office. I put the letter down on his desk. "Peterson," I asked, trying desperately to keep the tremor out of my voice, "explain this to me. What revision? Who is the new authorized signatory besides me?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. He nervously slid a few documents across the desk. And that's when I saw the scale of the betrayal laid bare. Serena hadn't just charmed John, she had used his trust to gain total financial access. The document showed a formal trust amendment form signed by John and a bank account resolution. The new authorized signatories for the primary business account were now listed as Emery A., last name, and Serena D., last name, last name. They had removed Mr. Peterson and, most crucially, the bank account resolution had been altered to require either my signature or Serena's for transactions. She had replaced the neutral guardian with herself. With one stroke of a pen, coerced from my own son, she had gained the power to control the daily cash flow, the rental income, and even the mortgage payments without my direct approval. John had reportedly told Mr. Peterson that I was stressed and ready to delegate more responsibilities to his capable new wife. Lies. All calculated lies fed to John by Serena, who likely convinced him it was a necessary sign of their new life together and a way to prove his trust in her. I felt the breath leave my body. This wasn't just about money. It was about the complete usurpation of my life's work. When I finally called John, he sounded immediately defensive and exasperated. "Mom, what is the big deal?" "Serena is trying to help us modernize the portfolio. She's smart. She has an MBA. Relax. It's all in the family now." In the family. The cold irony of that statement still chills me. She wasn't family. She was a hostile takeover artist, and she had just secured her first major piece of territory. I knew then that I wasn't just fighting for my peace of mind. I was fighting for the very future of my son, whom she was slowly but surely isolating and financially entrapping. I had to devise a counterplan, and I had to do it quietly because now my own son was, unknowingly, her informant. The battle had officially begun. Serena had the signatures, the bank access, and John's ear. But a smart mother doesn't rely on mere trust documents alone. My late husband and I had foreseen the possibility of an unforeseen disaster, and we had put a secret asset aside, a protective layer that John and Serena had no idea existed. What was this hidden safety net, and how would I deploy it to protect the last piece of John's inheritance from his ruthless wife? The shock of discovering Serena's calculated move to gain control over the business accounts left me reeling, but it also crystallized my resolve. She had succeeded in using John's love and trust to breach the first line of defense, but she had underestimated the foresight of a mother and a grieving widow. I knew I couldn't confront John directly. He was firmly under her influence, and any accusation against Serena would only push him further into her clutches. I had to fight smarter, not louder. I spent the next week in near silence, reviewing every deed, every policy, and every clause of the family trust. My husband, bless his cautious soul, had always taught me to look 3 steps ahead. He used to say, "Emery, people are only as good as their circumstances." Always have a lifeboat ready. That lifeboat was a policy we had established 15 years ago. It was an offshore, non-liquid portfolio, a series of properties and equities housed under a separate, obscure holding company legally distinct from the family trust, which managed our main local assets. This holding company was based in a small conservative state, requiring very specific, archaic legal mechanisms to access its funds. Crucially, the sole owner and controller of this company was not the family trust, but me, Emery last name, personally. We had set it up primarily as a contingency fund, untouchable by local debt or legal disputes. John didn't know about it because we felt, at the time, that too much responsibility too early could be overwhelming. Serena certainly didn't know about it because it was never mentioned in the Central Family Trust documents she had so carefully reviewed and exploited. This hidden asset represented about 40% of our total worth, the true rainy day fund. It was the one piece of property and capital she could not touch with a simple signature change at a local bank. It was my weapon. However, moving funds or assets out of the main family trust and into this secret holding company to protect them from Serena's new control would be impossible. She now had authority to flag suspicious transfers. The moment I started pulling large sums, she would sound the alarm, convince John I was trying to steal from him, and likely freeze the accounts. I had to let her think she was winning while subtly building a case against her. For the next 2 months, I played the part of the defeated mother. I barely contacted John, citing my need for space. I even let Serena handle a few small, routine payments for the business, knowing she would enjoy the feeling of power. This was my bait. I watched her, waiting for her greed to make her reckless. The sign started small. An expensive new car John suddenly bought, paid for entirely by the business account, framed as a necessary business expense. Then a large, unexplained wire transfer, 15,000 labeled vaguely as consulting fee Q3. When I questioned John about the consultant, he was vague, saying Serena handled the details. But the final straw came when I discovered she had stopped paying the property taxes on 3 of our smallest rental units, taxes that were due months ago. She was intentionally letting them slip toward delinquency. Why? Because properties sold under distress are often purchased cheaply by insiders. She was setting up a scheme to transfer those properties to herself or a shell company at a fraction of their worth using the business's own cash. I had watched her long enough. She was not just greedy, she was actively, maliciously dismantling the foundation of the family's wealth. It was time to deploy the lifeboat. But I couldn't just sue her. I needed undeniable proof for John, proof that would shatter his illusions and show him the monster he had married. I needed a professional. Serena was now openly defrauding the family trust by leveraging delinquent taxes. I had the secret assets to fall back on, but to win John back, I needed evidence that would stand up in court and, more importantly, in his heart. I decided to hire a private investigator, a former corporate fraud expert known for his ruthless efficiency. But Serena was smart and connected. Would she notice the man watching her every move? Or worse, would she use his presence to turn John against me for spying on his wife? The decision to hire a private investigator, a man named Marcus, was one of the hardest I've ever made. It felt like admitting utter defeat, acknowledging that the fight was no longer personal. It was a full-scale corporate and emotional war. But I needed a professional to navigate the labyrinth of Serena's financial deceit. I needed undeniable proof. Marcus was a former corporate fraud investigator. He was quiet, meticulous, and charged a terrifying fee, which thankfully I could pay entirely from my secure, separate holding company, the fund Serena didn't know existed. I met him in a quiet coffee shop 50 miles from my home, exchanging cash and documents in a discreet package. I gave him everything: the suspicious account signatory change, the vague consulting fee, and the documentation showing the deliberate non-payment of property taxes. "Mrs. Emery," Marcus said, his voice flat and steady, She's not just taking money, she's creating a scenario for distressed asset transfer. She wants those properties cheap, clean, and in her name. This is textbook. Hearing his assessment validated my fears, but it didn't ease the pain. The process of surveillance began immediately. Marcus installed tracking software on a dummy laptop I gave him, a device John occasionally used for business trips, Serena insisted upon. Marcus assured me he could trace her digital footprint, monitor her communications, and, most importantly, find the shell company she was using to prepare the distressed property purchases. Meanwhile, the emotional distance between John and me became a chasm. Serena had effectively poisoned every well. If I called John, she would hover, and the conversation would be strained and brief. If I suggested meeting, she always had a counter appointment, a business seminar, a charity function, a critical dinner meeting. One Sunday, desperate to see my son, I drove to their house unannounced. I parked down the street, my heart pounding. The house was beautiful, a testament to the success my husband and I had built. I walked up to the door and rang the bell. Serena opened it. She was dressed in athletic wear, holding a smoothie, radiating false health and happiness. Her smile vanished the moment she saw me. "Emery," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured surprise. "What a shock! Did you call first?" "I wanted to see my son Serena," I replied, keeping my voice level and calm. "Is he home?" She didn't move from the doorway, blocking my view. "He's busy. Very tied up with work. You know how demanding his new responsibilities are. He's taking a critical call right now, something about the South Side acquisitions. He can't be disturbed." I knew she was lying. John's calls were usually loud and open. The house was unnaturally silent. But I couldn't create a scene. I looked her directly in the eyes, letting her feel the contempt I couldn't express. "Tell him I stopped by, Serena," I said, "and tell him I miss him." "Of course," she chirped, the smile returning, sharp and insincere. "I'll deliver the message." She closed the door firmly, leaving me standing on the porch, alone, feeling the profound sting of exclusion. That day, I drove home weeping, realizing she had successfully barred me from my own son's life. 3 weeks later, I received an encrypted file. It contained the damning evidence. Serena had indeed set up a limited liability company, LLC, under a fake name, and she had begun the initial legal paperwork to purchase the 3 delinquent properties once the tax sale hit. This was not a mistake. It was premeditated fraud. The problem? The evidence was digital and complex. John would never believe it based on spreadsheets. I needed something simple, emotional, and undeniable to break through the spell she had cast. I now had the proof of Serena's financial treachery, but I still needed the key to unlock John's eyes. Then Marcus delivered the final piece of surveillance, a recording. It wasn't a conversation about money or property. It was far more personal, revealing Serena's true, hateful feelings about John's deceased father, and worse, about me. This was the weapon I needed. What did Serena say that was so vile, and how would I orchestrate the perfect moment for John to finally hear the truth? The distance Serena had enforced was excruciating, but it served its purpose. It kept her comfortable and careless. While she played the role of the dutiful, busy wife, I was gathering the ammunition I needed. Marcus, the private investigator, delivered the proof of the tax fraud in the shell company, but he knew, as I did, that John would rationalize complex financial schemes. He would believe Serena when she said I was misinterpreting the data. We needed something visceral, something that hit him where he was still vulnerable, his love for his father, and the remnants of his devotion to me. Marcus had placed a listening device in the office area of their home, the one John used for his alleged critical calls. One evening, Marcus sent me a chilling audio file. He warned me to be sitting down before I played it. The recording captured a conversation between Serena and an unknown female friend. It was late at night. Serena's voice, normally syrupy and sweet around John, was sharp, dismissive, and utterly cruel. "Oh, no, honey, he's useless without the trust fund," Serena sneered on the recording. "He's got his mother's naive gene. The business runs itself. He just needs someone to sign the papers and tell him he's brilliant. The hard part is dealing with his mother, Emery." Then came the blow that truly shocked me, the one that proved her contempt ran deeper than mere financial greed. She's such a pathetic, controlling old witch, Serena continued, laughing darkly. She thinks she was so smart with her stupid trust. Honestly, if John's father hadn't died when he did, we'd still be waiting for access. It's almost a relief that old man is gone. He was far too careful. Thank God for premature heart attacks, right? Now I just need to sideline Emery permanently, drain her ridiculous separate accounts, and then John is all mine, along with every last brick of their legacy. The laughter that followed was cold, devoid of humanity. When I first heard those words, the sheer glee in her voice over my husband's death, the vicious dismissal of me, and the callous view of my son as nothing more than a vehicle for assets, I didn't feel rage. I felt a cold, terrifying certainty. This woman was evil. She had not only stolen my son, but she had desecrated the memory of the man who had worked his whole life for John's future. This recording was my emotional grenade. The digital fraud evidence was for the courts. This audio was for John's soul. I had to deliver it perfectly. If I simply emailed it, Serena would spin a counter-narrative claiming the audio was faked, that I was stalking her, that I was obsessed with destroying their marriage. I needed to create a situation where John heard the truth with his own ears, without any preparation or buffer from Serena. My opportunity came when John texted me unexpectedly, asking to meet for a quick lunch the following week. He sounded guilty, like he was sneaking a moment away from his warden. It was a sign that perhaps a sliver of the golden boy still remembered his mother. I accepted immediately, insisting we meet at a small, old-fashioned diner near the business park, a spot we used to frequent when he was a teenager. It was neutral territory, a place Serena never went. I called Marcus and laid out the plan. I would bring a small digital recorder hidden in my purse, and I would orchestrate the moment to play the vile audio. It was a high-stakes gamble, but I had nothing left to lose. My son's life and his family's legacy depended on this single, desperate act. The day of the lunch arrived. My heart was in my throat. I had the recorder, the evidence, and the desperate hope that the sound of his wife celebrating his father's death would finally break John's delusion. But Serena, sensing a shift in the wind, made an unexpected move right before the meeting. What did she do that threatened to sabotage my entire plan? And would John finally see the truth, or would he accuse me of espionage? The day I was set to meet John at the old diner felt like the most important day of my life. I rehearsed the conversation countless times, practicing how to gently guide the topic toward Serena without sounding accusatory, while keeping my hand steady on the small digital recorder hidden inside my purse. I knew the audio was my one chance to shatter John's world and save him. Then, just an hour before our scheduled lunch, my phone buzzed with an ominous text from John. John's text: "Mom, I'm so sorry, but Serena needs me to come with her to a meeting across town. She said it's crucial for the new property acquisitions. Can we reschedule? Love you." It was a classic Serena maneuver, isolating him, demanding his attention right when he was about to reconnect with me. She was clearly paranoid, sensing even a small shift in his loyalty. She wasn't going to let him out of her sight. I replied immediately, not with disappointment, but with urgency. Emery's text: "John, this can't wait. It's about the property acquisitions. I have information regarding the 3 units that are tax delinquent. It involves fraud. Meet me now. If you don't come, I will take this information straight to the police and the courts, and it will involve Serena." That got his attention. The threat of legal action against his wife was a desperate, calculated risk, but it worked. 10 minutes later, he called back, his voice tight with anxiety. "Mom, what are you talking about? Fraud? Are you okay? I'm almost there." I arrived first, taking a booth in the back corner of the diner. I ordered a coffee, my hand shaking only slightly. When John walked in, he looked different, strained. His eyes were heavy, and the easy warmth he once carried was replaced by a perpetual look of worry and fatigue. The Serena effect. He sat down, immediately defensive. "Mom, what is this emergency?" "You can't just throw around words like fraud." "Serena handles everything perfectly." What did you find? I found your future being dismantled, John, I said quietly, leaning in so only he could hear. I know she convinced you to change the bank signatory, to give her control. But she isn't modernizing the portfolio, John. She's stealing it. He bristled. That is a horrible thing to say. She is working tirelessly for us. She told me you were getting paranoid, that you were struggling with letting go. I ignored the familiar accusation. She failed to pay the taxes on 3 properties. Why? Because she set up a fake LLC under an alias to buy them back from the city at a rock bottom price using your cash. She is actively stealing our assets. I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, but he quickly extinguished it. Show me proof, Mom. Real proof, not just your theory. I trust my wife. I know you do, John, and that trust is precisely what she's exploiting. I have the proof of the LLC, the transfer documents, and the delinquent notices. But I have something else, something you need to hear with your own ears. It's the truth about what your trustworthy wife thinks of our family and your father. I took a deep breath and with one swift movement pulled the small recorder from my purse and placed it on the table. Before you look at the documents, John, listen to this. Every word. And tell me if you still trust her. I pressed play. The hiss and static of the office recording filled the air just enough for him to hear, and then came Serena's cold, cruel voice discussing his father's death. Serena's voice on the recorder. Honestly, if John's father hadn't died when he did, we'd still be waiting for access. Thank God for premature heart attacks, right? Now I just need to sideline Emery permanently. John's face, already pale, went completely white. He didn't move. He sat motionless, listening to the vile laughter that followed, the voice of the woman he loved, celebrating the death of the man who raised him. When the laughter faded, I clicked, "Stop." Silence descended over the small booth. John didn't look at me. He stared at the recorder, his hand shaking uncontrollably. "John," I whispered, "that's the real Serena." He looked up, his eyes wide, vacant, and suddenly, terrifyingly, full of something I hadn't seen in years, raw, unfiltered pain. His delusion had just been shattered, but the shock was immense. The audio evidence hit John like a physical blow. The trust was broken, but the emotional damage was catastrophic. He pushed back from the table, breathing heavily, clearly disoriented. He knew I was right, but facing the truth about Serena meant admitting he had been a fool. Would John finally break free and join me in the fight, or would the shame and manipulation hold him captive? And what devastating consequence would my move in the diner bring down upon us both? The fallout is immediate and terrifying. The silence in the diner after the recording ended was heavier than any argument could have been. John stared at the recorder, his mind visibly racing, trying to process the horrifying reality that the woman he had given everything to, the woman he had chosen over his own mother, was a callous manipulator who celebrated his father's death. Then the shock turned to a dangerous, volatile anger. But it wasn't directed at Serena. It was directed at me. He slammed his hands down on the table, making the coffee cups jump. You recorded her? You had a listening device planted in my house? Mom, what is wrong with you? This is illegal. This is stalking. I was prepared for the rage, but not for the misplaced guilt. John, listen to yourself. She is defrauding us. She just celebrated your father's premature death, and you're worried about my methods. She can claim this is fake. She can claim you doctored it. You have gone too far, Mother. You're obsessed with destroying my marriage because you can't stand letting go. I trusted you, and you hired a spy to invade my home. He stood up, knocking his chair slightly askew. The years of Serena's manipulation, the constant accusations that I was paranoid and controlling had left deep marks. Even faced with irrefutable proof, the conditioned response was to defend the source of his misery. John, look at the documents Marcus sent me. She is letting the properties fail so her shell company can acquire them. She is stealing from you. This isn't about me. This is about the life your father built, I pleaded, gesturing toward the folder of evidence that lay untouched on the table. He didn't look at the folder. He just shook his head, his eyes red with a mixture of shame, confusion, and fury. I need to talk to her. I need to hear her explanation. She will lie, John. She will spin it. She is a sociopath. I am leaving, he said, his voice flat and terrifyingly final. He snatched his keys and walked out of the diner, leaving me alone in the booth with the bitter reality that I had won the battle of evidence, but perhaps lost the war for my son's heart. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Within 2 hours, I received an official notice from the law firm that handled the family trust. Serena had leveraged the co-signatory power John granted her to petition the court for a temporary restraining order, TRO, against me. The legal document claimed that I was engaging in harassment, financial interference, and emotional abuse, and that my actions, specifically planting surveillance equipment and disseminating unauthorized recordings, posed a threat to John's peace of mind and the stable management of the family assets. The order was granted ex parte without my presence. Effective immediately, I was barred from communicating with John directly, from entering their residence or the main business office, and, most cripplingly, I was temporarily suspended as the primary trustee of the family trust, pending a full review. Serena was named the sole interim trustee. Serena had moved with lightning speed, using my own evidence of spying against me. She had convinced John that my actions were criminal and unbalanced, forcing him to choose between a crazy, criminal mother's and his loyal, professional wife. He chose the path of least resistance, silence, and compliance orchestrated by Serena. I was cut off, financially, emotionally, and legally isolated. My home was quiet, but the silence was deafening, filled with the echo of Serena's triumphant laughter and the sound of my son walking away. Serena now had complete, temporary control of everything, and I was entirely on the defense. Serena had successfully weaponized my attempt to save John, using the TRO to gain full control of the family trust. I was suspended, silenced, and facing serious legal repercussions. She believed I was now powerless. But she forgot about one thing, the secret offshore fund, my hidden asset, controlled entirely by me. With my local assets frozen, how would I use this secret resource to fight the restraining order and gather the necessary legal firepower to expose Serena's massive fraud to the courts? The fight goes from personal to legal, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The temporary restraining order was Serena's masterpiece of manipulation. She hadn't just won the day. She had weaponized my maternal concern and legally bound my hands. I was suspended as trustee, barred from contacting John, and cut off from the primary family assets. She thought she had neutralized me, leaving me financially exposed and emotionally broken. But she had forgotten the lesson my husband taught me: always have a lifeboat. The secret offshore holding company, which controlled 40% of our true generational wealth, was my lifeline. It was entirely in my name, immune to the family trust's local legal complications, and completely invisible to Serena's eager eyes. It was my war chest. My first move was to secure a new legal team. The law firm that issued the TRO was John's longtime firm, likely coerced by Serena's new authority as interim trustee. I needed a shark, someone ruthless, expensive, and specializing in corporate fraud and complex asset litigation. I immediately contacted an attorney named Elias Vance, known in the city as a brilliant but cold legal mind, who only took on cases where he was guaranteed total control and a hefty retainer. I met Vance in his austere high-rise office. I laid out the whole story: the marriage, the signatory changes, the secret recording, the tax fraud, and the TRO. Then I showed him the accounts for the secret holding company. Vance raised an eyebrow, the first sign of genuine interest. "Mrs. Emery, this is a delicate situation. Your local assets are frozen, but you have substantial liquid capital here, separate from the contested trust. This changes everything. We can fight the TRO immediately based on your history as trustee, and simultaneously file a massive civil suit for fraudulent misappropriation of assets against Serena. We will use the offshore funds to gather the necessary expert witnesses and forensic accountants. The cost was staggering, but I agreed instantly. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about justice and rescuing my son. The second and more difficult move was finding a way to communicate with John without violating the TRO. The order stated I couldn't contact him directly, but I knew he was living under tremendous stress. He had seen the truth in the diner, and that knowledge was eating away at his soul. I reached out to an old family friend, a man named Robert, who was a neutral party and a former colleague of John's father. Robert had always been skeptical of Serena. I arranged a clandestine meeting with Robert and provided him with a detailed, heartfelt letter to John, along with the untouched folder of financial evidence, the LLC papers, the tax notices, and a transcript of the vile recording. My letter was not accusatory. It was an apology for my methods and an unwavering declaration of love. Emery's letter, voice of Emery, John. I violated your trust, and I am sorry, but I did it to save you. Your wife has suspended me, she has cut me off, and she is proceeding with the purchase of your assets through fraud. I cannot speak to you, but Robert can give you this information. I am fighting for your future, John, with every resource I have left. Please, for your father's memory, look at the evidence. Do not let her destroy everything. Robert agreed to meet John under the guise of discussing his father's old business partnership. It was a risk. If John told Serena, Robert could also face legal pressure, but the man was loyal to the family. While the legal machine started grinding and Robert prepared his meeting with John, Serena was becoming complacent. Believing she had silenced me, she began to take bolder steps, fully intending to exploit her temporary trustee status. She planned the final, devastating move, the sale of the most valuable asset in the family trust, the downtown commercial business park. This sale would generate millions in easily transferable cash she could hide or drain before the courts ever saw my filing. Serena was now moving to sell the largest, most valuable asset in the family trust, a move that would permanently dismantle John's inheritance and destroy the business. Attorney Vance was filing the civil suit, but the court systems moved slowly. I had to find a way to stall that sale, or the money would be gone forever. How would I, an officially suspended trustee barred from the office, halt the sale of a multi-million-dollar property, and what devastating effect would this final betrayal have on John when he finally received my letter? Serena's confidence, fueled by the successful temporary restraining order, quickly turned into recklessness. She believed she had time. She believed I was neutralized. But while she celebrated her legal victory, my attorney, Elias Vance, was preparing the civil suit, using my offshore funds to gather the necessary forensic proof. The biggest problem now wasn't proving fraud, but stopping the immediate, irrevocable sale of the family trust's crown jewel, the downtown commercial business park. If Serena sold that park, she could transfer the millions in proceeds into accounts that would vanish overnight, leaving the family trust an empty shell. I couldn't allow that to happen. I received the intelligence from Marcus, the investigator, who was still tracking Serena's professional communications. She had scheduled the closing for the business park sale in 2 weeks. The buyer was a large, legitimate investment group, completely unaware they were involved in a hostile family fraud. I called Elias Vance immediately. "We need an injunction, Elias. We need to stop that sale, or the assets are gone forever." Vance was pragmatic. "Mrs. Emery, a full injunction takes time. We have to file the lawsuit, demonstrate financial harm, and convince a judge. 2 weeks is dangerously fast, especially with the TRO against you." We had to get creative. Since I couldn't directly contact the buyers or John, and the TRO prevented me from intervening legally as a trustee, we decided to use the one tool that could hit the transaction immediately and create maximum disruption, the title company. Vance drafted an official, highly detailed notice of pending litigation and a lease pendens notice of a pending suit affecting title to property. These documents stated clearly that the property, while currently under the control of the interim trustee Serena, was the subject of a massive fraud suit involving the misappropriation of family assets. The crucial part was that Vance served this notice not only to the court, but directly to the large, reputable title insurance company handling the closing. A title company's primary job is to ensure the title is clean and the seller has the legal right to sell. Receiving a lease pendants from a highly reputable attorney, even if the suit hasn't been fully heard, throws a wrench into the entire transaction. No reputable title insurer will close a multi-million-dollar deal knowing there is a pending, high-stakes fraud case attached to the property. It's too much risk. Within 48 hours, the title company called Serena's lawyer. The message was clear. The closing is suspended indefinitely. They would not issue the title insurance required for the sale until the fraud litigation was resolved. Serena was furious. She had seen her plan for a quick cash-out collapse just days before the closing. Her first act was to accuse John, whom she still controlled, of tipping me off. John, however, was in a crisis of his own. Robert, the old family friend, had succeeded in meeting with him. Robert simply handed John my letter and the folder, saying, "Your mother asked me to give you this. It's time you decided who the real enemy is." John took the folder. He read my letter first, the apology for spying, the declaration of love, and the plea for his future. Then, slowly, painfully, he reviewed the evidence, the clear tax notices, the fraudulent LLC papers, and the transcript of Serena's conversation. The evidence, combined with the vile audio he had heard, finally broke through the layers of manipulation. He saw the truth, stark and undeniable. Serena hadn't just used him. She was actively destroying his inheritance, celebrating his father's death, and successfully convincing him to betray his mother. The shame and the realization of his gullibility were catastrophic. He finally understood. The woman who was fighting to control every aspect of his life was a criminal. He was trapped, legally bound by the very legal process he had initiated against me. John knew the truth, but he was isolated, terrified, and legally constrained by the TRO he had helped Serena file. He couldn't speak to me, and he knew Serena would be watching his every move, especially now that the sale was stalled. His only chance was to break free and finally stand with me. But how would he signal his realization to me without Serena finding out? And what dangerous final demand would Serena make when she realized John was wavering? The filing of the lease pendants was a powerful legal checkmate, stalling the sale of the business park and driving Serena into a frenzy of rage. But while she focused her fury on the title company and my legal team, John was facing his own personal hell. He was awake now, shattered by the recording and the undeniable financial evidence. But he was trapped by the very legal cage he had helped Serena build, the temporary restraining order, TRO. He couldn't call me. He couldn't meet me. Any direct communication would violate the TRO, and Serena, knowing he was wavering, would use that violation to permanently sever my parental rights and claim I was mentally unfit. I knew he needed to signal his allegiance. I waited agonizingly, watching for any sign that my golden boy was ready to fight back. John was terrified of Serena's reaction. He knew she monitored his calls, his texts, and his financial movements. He couldn't risk leaving a paper trail. His signal had to be subtle, untraceable, and understood only by a mother who knew him better than anyone. The signal came disguised as a routine business email. It was sent from John's work address to an old, rarely used personal email account I maintained, an account Serena didn't know existed. The subject line was bland, regarding the Q2 2025 rental unit maintenance review. The body of the email was a single strange sentence. John's email, voice of Emery, the roof repair on 47 Willow Ellen must be delayed until March of 2026. The funds are currently unavailable due to unexpected legal fees. At first, I dismissed it as genuine business communication, perhaps forwarded to me accidentally, but John had never used his personal email for business. I read the sentence again, slower, focusing on the capitalized and specific words. 47, LN, March 20. It was a code. My mind raced back to his childhood, to the coded messages we used to write each other in notes passed during family holidays. John always loved using numbers and street names to spell out words. 47 was the number he always assigned to the letter S, is, in the fourth and seventh letters after a sequence jump. RLN was always shorthand for line. Jed. March was always the third month, representing C's or K. 20 was the simple numerical representation of T's. But what truly cracked the code was the specific address, 47 Willow Lane. Willow Lane was the address of the small local library where John and I used to spend every Saturday morning when he was a child. He used to hide secret notes in his favorite book, a dusty copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. The code wasn't a message, it was a location and a directive. He was sending me to the one place Serena would never think to look, a memory. I drove to the library, my hands clammy. I found the old, heavy copy of The Count of Monte Cristo in the classic literature section. I flipped quickly through the pages, looking for the telltale indentation of a hidden note. On page 26, the number mentioned in the email, 26, tucked deep into the binding, was a small, folded piece of paper. I retreated to my car and unfolded the note. It was John's handwriting. John's note. Mom, I heard it. I saw the proof. I'm so sorry. I'm trapped. She is planning something new to retaliate for the sale delay. It involves a massive loan against the last free property. We meet at the gardens at noon next Tuesday. Wear the blue scarf. Burn this. Tears streamed down my face. My son was back. He saw the truth, and he was risking everything to help me. The joy of his return was immediately overshadowed by the terrifying content of his message. Serena was planning a new, final financial attack, a massive loan secured against the last unencumbered property to pull liquid cash out before the court could intervene. I needed to act fast. I needed to meet him. John and I had a rendezvous planned at the gardens, a public place that offered a chance for a brief, safe exchange of information. But Serena, enraged by the failed sale and sensing John's growing distance, had become desperate. She was escalating her surveillance and her emotional abuse. Would John manage to slip away to meet me? Or would Serena anticipate our move and turn our secret meeting into a dangerous trap? John's coded message confirmed two things. His heart was finally free of Serena's spell, and we were in imminent danger. His note warned of Serena's next financial maneuver, a massive loan against the last unencumbered property to generate fast, liquid cash, which she would undoubtedly siphon off. Our meeting at the gardens next Tuesday was crucial. I spent the next few days in a state of high alert. I told Elias Vance, my lawyer, about the coded communication, and he cautioned me fiercely against violating the TRO. Mrs. Emery, if she catches you, she will use it to paint you as unstable and obsessed. John will be in contempt. Be discreet. This meeting must produce actionable intelligence. The day of the rendezvous arrived. It was a crisp, clear Tuesday. I dressed plainly, wearing the unmistakable blue scarf John had specified, a signal of my identity and cooperation. The gardens was a sprawling botanical park, full of twisting paths and large, noisy water features, perfect for a private conversation in a public space. I arrived precisely at noon and walked toward the central fountain, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. I scanned the faces, half expecting Serena's smug expression to pop out from behind a hedge, but I saw nothing suspicious. Then I saw John. He was sitting on a stone bench under a large oak tree, looking down at his hands. He was thin, pale, and dressed in a suit that looked too large for him. The golden light I had cherished for 30 years was gone, replaced by the haunted look of a man who had stared into the abyss. I walked up quietly and sat beside him. I did not speak first, giving him control. He flinched when he realized I was there, and then, slowly, he looked up. His eyes, though weary, were clear. The first thing he did was reach out and take my hand, a silent apology for the past months of torment. "Mom," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I was an idiot, a complete, blinded fool." "Shh," I murmured, squeezing his hand. "No time for apologies, son. We need to talk about Serena. Tell me about the loan. What property?" He pulled his hand back, becoming instantly businesslike and cautious. "The lakeside cabin property. It's the only one left that's entirely debt-free. She applied for a 3 to 5 million home equity loan against it. She rushed the appraisal. The money is scheduled to hit the main business account in 3 days. It's too fast for the courts to stop. 3 days? My voice was barely a breath. If she gets that cash, she'll be on a plane before Vance can file an emergency stop. Exactly, John confirmed, his eyes darting around the garden. But there's a loophole. She's been so focused on getting the cash, she made a mistake on the loan application itself. She forged my signature, or at least she signed for me without my knowledge, which is the same as forgery, but she used a witness. A notary. Who was the notary? I asked urgently. Serena's old college roommate, Laura. She works at a small independent escrow office across town. Serena has been doing quick, shady paperwork with her for months. Laura is corruptible, Mom. She'll say she witnessed my signature, but she didn't. I was out of the country when the document was processed. This was it. The direct, actionable intelligence we needed. The loan itself was the crime, and the notary was the weak link. John, you need to go to Elias Vance's office immediately. Tell him everything. You need to sign an affidavit stating you were out of the country, that the signature is forged, and that the notary is lying. This will allow Vance to freeze the loan disbursement before the bank transfers the money. I can't go to Vance, Mom, John said, his voice dropping to a panicked whisper. Serena put a tracker on my phone in the car. She knows I drove here. She knows I'm not at her critical business meeting. If I go to Vance's office now, she'll see the location change, and she'll realize I'm turning on her. She'll drain every account she already controls and disappear. He looked at me, desperation etched on his face. I've been playing along for days, Mom. I need to get back now and pretend everything is normal. You have to take the information. You have to tell Vance and get the affidavit ready. I'll find a way to meet him later without the trackers to sign it. He quickly jotted down the loan details, the bank name, and the notary's name, Laura Benson, on a small piece of napkin. He pressed it into my hand and stood up abruptly. I love you, Mom, he said, the words heavy with meaning. I'm fighting. You fight too. Now go and burn the scarf. He walked away quickly, disappearing into the crowd of tourists, leaving me sitting on the bench with the napkin, the chilling knowledge of the imminent financial disaster and the profound relief that my son was finally on my side. I had the details, the timeline, and the name of Serena's accomplice, the notary. But Serena, enraged by the prolonged meeting and John's odd behavior, was already home, waiting for him. I knew I had put John in grave danger. What devastating retaliation did Serena have planned for John when he walked through that door, and would I get the affidavit signed and stop the loan before she could destroy the family's future forever? I raced from the gardens, the napkin clutched in my hand, feeling like a ticking time bomb. I drove straight to Elias Vance's office, my mind focused solely on getting the emergency stop order for the $3.5 million loan. Vance acted instantly. With the detailed information John provided, the specific bank, the loan amount, and the notary's name, Laura Benson Vance's team prepared a devastating legal package. We filed a formal motion to intervene, claiming the pending loan constituted immediate and irreparable financial harm to the family trust, backed by the initial fraud evidence Marcus had already uncovered. Crucially, Vance needed John's affidavit confirming the forged signature to secure the court's emergency intervention. But John was not safe. I knew the moment he walked back into that house, Serena would descend on him like a vulture. I had Marcus, the private investigator, stake out John and Serena's home, instructing him to monitor the property, but under no circumstances to violate the TRO or interfere physically. I just needed to know John was alive. The reports that came back from Marcus were chilling. John arrived home approximately 2 hours after our meeting. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but the intensity was unmistakable. Serena knew. She hadn't just suspected, she had likely tracked John's brief deviation from his supposed business route and confronted him immediately. The next few hours were torture for me. Marcus reported that John's car was still parked in the garage, but no lights came on in the master bedroom, and the silence had become oppressive. Finally, late that night, Marcus relayed a short, disturbing observation. Serena emerged from the house looking composed but rigid and drove off in her own car. The following morning, Marcus reported John's vehicle was still in the garage and there was no sign of him leaving for work, which was highly unusual. I couldn't call, I couldn't visit, and I couldn't panic, but a mother knows when her child is in distress. I called Vance. Elias, she's holding him. She knows he's turned. We have to assume she is using emotional and possibly physical coercion. We need the affidavit now. Vance was relentless on the legal front. He managed to secure a judge's promise to review our emergency filing on the loan within 24 hours. However, without John's signature on the affidavit, it was only circumstantial evidence. We needed John to break free. My old family friend Robert, who had delivered my first letter, offered to try and help. He drove past the house, pretending to drop off a package. He reported back that the house felt dead. He caught a glimpse of Serena returning briefly, looking furious, and then leaving again quickly, carrying a small, heavy briefcase. My maternal instinct screamed at me to violate the TRO, to burst in and save my son, but I knew that was exactly what Serena wanted. If I stepped foot on the property, she would file criminal charges, and the judge would dismiss all my fraud claims as the ramblings of a scorned, unstable woman. I had to use my hidden resources to force her hand, and the only remaining leverage I had was her accomplice, the notary, Laura Benson. I instructed Marcus to find Laura Benson's home address and her place of business. Then I had Vance send Laura a carefully worded, non-threatening legal notice. It wasn't a subpoena yet, but a formal warning that she was now a person of interest in a large-scale corporate fraud and forgery investigation involving a $3.5 million loan. The notice stated that her testimony would be required and that providing false testimony under oath carried severe prison sentences. The moment Laura Benson received that notice, Serena's carefully constructed scheme began to crumble from the edges. Laura Benson, the corruptible notary, was now sweating, caught between the promise of Serena's cash and the terrifying threat of jail time. But while this put pressure on Serena's allies, John was still trapped. Later that day, I received a cryptic text, not from John's phone, but from a burner number containing only an address and a single word, emergency. Was this a genuine plea from John, or a desperate final trap set by Serena to lure me into violating the TRO permanently? The pressure was reaching a breaking point. My legal team was ready to stop the loan, but we were stalled without John's affidavit. Meanwhile, John was essentially being held captive by Serena, who was consumed by fury after the failed sale. Then came the text message. It arrived on my phone from an unknown burner number. It contained only an address, an old, derelict warehouse district on the city outskirts, and the single, chilling word, emergency. My heart seized. It could be John finally managing to send a lifeline. Or it could be the trap Serena had been waiting for, a carefully orchestrated scheme to lure me into violating the TRO in a place where she could stage a confrontation and call the police, ensuring my total legal ruin. I immediately contacted Marcus, the private investigator, and Elias Vance, my lawyer. Vance was adamant, "Mrs. Emery, you absolutely cannot go. It is a textbook setup. If she has lured you there, she will have witnesses or a camera ready to film you violating the TRO. We are winning legally. Do not give her the emotional ammunition to destroy our case." But Marcus, sensing my panic, offered a compromise. "I will go first, Mrs. Emery. I will arrive discreetly and scout the location. If John is there, I will confirm his safety. If it's Serena, I will retreat immediately. You stay put until I give you the all clear." I agreed, the tension unbearable. For 2 long hours, I paced my living room, every minute feeling like an hour. Finally, Marcus called back. His voice was low and serious. "Mrs. Emery, it's not a trap, but it's not safe. John is here. He's alone, visibly shaken, and waiting outside the old abandoned shipping facility. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. He's not on the property, so he's not violating the TRO, but he looks desperate to leave." "Is Serena there?" I asked. "No visible sign of her, but I don't like this location. It's too isolated. He must have slipped away using Serena's car when she was distracted. He needs to move now." I told Marcus to stay put and protect John from a distance. Then I called Vance. "Elias, John is out. He is vulnerable. You need to meet me at that location immediately with the affidavit. We have to get his signature, secure his testimony, and get him somewhere safe before Serena realizes he's gone." Vance, recognizing the critical window of opportunity, moved his schedule around. He arrived at the warehouse district 10 minutes before I did, armed with his briefcase and the crucial legal document. When I drove up, John was shivering, huddled against the wall of the derelict building. He saw my car and rushed toward it. He didn't speak. He just fell into my arms, hugging me with a bone-deep exhaustion. It wasn't the embrace of a grown man, but of a scared little boy who finally found safety. She locked me in the room, Mom," he choked out, leaning against me. "She took my phone. She threatened to tell the courts I was mentally unstable. I stole her spare keys while she was arguing with her notary friend." Vance was all business. He stood slightly apart, ensuring I wasn't technically within the TRO distance, but close enough to conduct the signing. "John, we need your signature on this affidavit immediately. This document confirms the forgery and will stop the $3.5 million loan. It formally turns you against Serena, and it will give us the ammunition to have the TRO dismissed and expose her crimes." John didn't hesitate. He took the pen and, leaning against the hood of my car, signed the affidavit. The moment that pen touched the paper, the legal tide turned irrevocably in my favor. "Where do I go, Mom? She'll come back," John whispered. I had anticipated this. "Marcus has an extraction plan. He will take you to a secure, undisclosed location where you can be debriefed and protected until the initial court hearing. You are safe now, son. We are fighting this together." But as John turned to follow Marcus, who had emerged from the shadows, we heard the screech of tires. A black SUV barreled around the corner, stopping abruptly. The driver's door flew open. It was Serena. She was back, and she was incandescent with rage. Serena had tracked John to the warehouse just minutes too late. She saw the pen in his hand, the lawyers, and the blue scarf, the final undeniable proof of his betrayal. She didn't scream or plead. Instead, she walked toward us, her face contorted in a mask of terrifying, quiet fury, reaching into her bag and pulling out a document. What was this final, unexpected document she brandished? And would she succeed in stopping John's escape and destroying our last chance at freedom? Serena's appearance was synchronized with demonic perfection. We had seconds before she could reach John, and the danger was palpable. She wasn't just angry. Her fury had solidified into a cold, calculated intent to destroy. As John hurried towards Marcus's waiting, unmarked vehicle, Serena shrieked his name, her voice echoing off the warehouse walls. She held up a single, folded document. "John!" "Stop. Don't listen to her. Don't you dare sign away your life," she screamed. John paused, his hand already on the car door. He looked at her, no longer with love or fear, but with a profound, bitter disgust. "It's too late, Serena. I know everything." She dropped her pleading facade immediately, her face twisting into a triumphant, chilling sneer. "Oh, you know everything? Do you know about this, John?" She waved the document in the air. Elias Vance, my lawyer, squinted at the paper from a distance, and his professional composure cracked. "Mrs. Emery, get John in the car, now!" Vance yelled, his voice laced with alarm. But it was too late. Serena's next words hit John like a physical punch, forcing him to freeze mid-step. "You may have stopped the loan, John, but you didn't stop this. When you walked out, I filed for divorce, and I filed for contested division of assets under the pretext of your mother's interference and your instability." She paused, letting the words sink in, then delivered the final, devastating blow. "And guess what, darling? 6 weeks ago, while you were drinking on that business trips I sent you on, I convinced you to sign a post-nuptial agreement. It states that in the event of a divorce contested by either party due to mental or emotional instability, the assets you inherited prior to the marriage, specifically the family trust properties, will be liquidated and divided 50-50. My blood ran cold. A post-nuptial agreement? John had been so blindly in love, or perhaps so heavily intoxicated, that he had signed away half of his entire inheritance, all the while thinking it was merely another business document Serena required for asset protection. John stared at her, his expression shattering from anger into pure, helpless despair. You trapped me," he whispered. "No, your mother trapped you," Serena hissed, lowering her voice but maintaining eye contact with him. "She drove you to the courts with her paranoia, and now half of everything, including the business park, the rentals, and this house, is legally mine." "You signed it, John, just like you signed the bank papers. Your stupidity is my retirement." The raw, evil truth of her scheme was finally revealed. The fraud was just a sideshow. The real prize was a divorce settlement, perfectly engineered using his own hand to guarantee she walked away a multimillionaire. She had made sure that no matter who won the fraud case, the marriage dissolution would grant her half. Vance rushed over to me, muttering furiously, "If that agreement is valid, even if we prove the fraud, the divorce settlement will bypass the fraud ruling on the asset division. We can stop the loan, but we can't stop the dissolution." "Mom," John's voice was barely audible, his face buried in his hands. He was utterly broken. The realization of his colossal, irreversible mistake was more devastating than the betrayal itself. "Get him out of here, Marcus," I ordered. "Now, before she calls the police." Marcus acted swiftly, pulling the traumatized John into the vehicle and speeding away. Serena stood alone in the empty lot, smiling, clutching the post-nuptial agreement. She had achieved her goal. She had broken John, secured her wealth, and successfully had me violate the TRO spirit by directly interacting with John on an emergency meeting, which she could now spin to the courts as coercion. I stood there, looking at the woman who had stolen my son's heart, his security, and his dignity. But I still had my secret resource, and now I had John. The legal battle had just taken a dark, complex turn. Serena held the trump card, a signed post-nuptial agreement guaranteeing her half of the fortune. The courts would now prioritize the divorce settlement. John was safe, but utterly defeated. Could Elias Vance find a way to nullify a legally signed post-nuptial agreement, or had Serena truly succeeded in making her escape with half the assets? And what terrible final act of revenge would she take when she realized her notary, Laura Benson, was turning against her? Serena had played her trump card, the post-nuptial agreement. It was a cold, calculated move that threatened to circumvent all my efforts, guaranteeing her a massive payday through the divorce courts, regardless of our fraud claim. John was safe, but the weight of his colossal mistake had crushed his spirit. With John now secured in a secret location under Marcus's protection, Elias Vance and I had two urgent priorities. First, securing John's full testimony and preparing the massive civil suit, and second, finding a flaw in that devastating post-nuptial agreement. Vance was furious but focused. "The good news, Emery, is the affidavit stopped the $3.5 million loan in its tracks. The bank is now investigating Serena for fraud and forgery. The bad news is this post-nup. If it was properly witnessed and notarized, it holds serious weight, even if the marriage was based on deceit. Our only hope lay in proving the post-nup was signed under duress or incapacity. John had confessed he was heavily drinking during that business trip when he signed it." Vance dispatched a private medical team to assess John's mental state, hoping to establish he wasn't competent to sign legally binding documents at that time. While Vance attacked the post-nup, I focused on the weak link, the notary, Laura Benson. My legal notice had terrified Laura. Marcus reported that Laura had stopped answering Serena's calls and had taken a sudden, unexplained leave of absence from her escrow office. The threat of prison was proving stronger than the promise of Serena's cash. Vance moved quickly, obtaining a subpoena for Laura Benson to compel her testimony regarding the forged loan document. We made sure the subpoena was served publicly and dramatically, ensuring the local legal community and, more importantly, Serena's lawyer saw the severity of the situation. The moment the subpoena was delivered, Serena retaliated with a desperate final act of pure spite. She couldn't find John, and she couldn't get the loan money, so she went after the one thing she knew would hurt me deeply, my home. Serena used her remaining authority as the interim trustee to initiate a forced sale of my personal residence, the house my husband and I had lived in for 40 years. She claimed the property was underperforming and its equity was necessary to cover emergency legal fees for the family trust, i.e., her defense. I received the notice. I had 30 days to vacate. This wasn't about money. It was a psychological attack, a vindictive move to erase every trace of my life with John's father. "This is abuse, Elias," I exclaimed, my voice shaking with emotion. "She's trying to make me homeless." "And we will stop it," Vance promised, his jaw tight. "We have the evidence of her motive. We will file a motion to halt the sale based on her clear conflict of interest and vindictive actions, citing it as further proof of her unfitness to serve as trustee." However, before Vance could file the motion, Laura Benson contacted us. Terrified of a forgery conviction and facing professional ruin, she offered to flip. "I'll talk," Laura whispered to Vance over a recorded line. Serena paid me a cash bonus to notarize the loan document, claiming John had signed it earlier. "I never saw John sign anything, but there's something else about the postnup." Laura confessed that she had also notarized the postnuptial agreement 6 weeks ago. She confirmed that while John's signature was present, he was, in her words, barely coherent. More importantly, she revealed that the agreement was originally drafted to protect John from Serena's debt, but Serena had cunningly switched the pages at the last minute, substituting a new page detailing the 50-50 division. Laura admitted she only certified the signatures, not the content. This was the crack in the foundation of Serena's entire empire. The postnup wasn't just signed under duress, it was signed based on a deliberate, fraudulent substitution of documents. With Laura Benson's testimony secured, we had the evidence to dismantle Serena's two most devastating weapons, the forged loan and the fraudulent postnuptial agreement. The judge scheduled an emergency hearing to review all the evidence and rule on Serena's fitness as the interim trustee. The courtroom showdown was set. Would John's sudden, dramatic appearance at the hearing convince the judge, or would Serena's lawyers use her crocodile tears and allegations of my instabilities to salvage her 50 divorce claim? With the testimony of Laura Benson secured, Serena's carefully constructed empire was on the verge of collapse. My lawyer, Elias Vance, filed the motion to intervene, presenting the mountain of evidence, the initial fraud, the foiled loan forgery, the vindictive forced sale of my home, and now the sworn testimony detailing the fraudulent substitution of the postnuptial agreement pages. The judge scheduled an emergency hearing to determine Serena's fitness as interim trustee and to address the validity of the postnup. The day of the hearing arrived. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Serena, dressed impeccably and radiating false vulnerability, sat beside her high-powered divorce attorney. She looked pale but resolute, ready to play the victim of a jealous, overbearing mother-in-law. Vance began by presenting the financial evidence. He laid out the LLC fraud, the delinquent taxes, and the detailed attempt to secure the $3.5 million loan using a forged signature, all backed by John's signed affidavit. Serena's lawyer argued that my actions were based on paranoia, attempting to discredit John's testimony by referencing my illegal surveillance. Then Vance called Laura Benson to the stand. Laura, terrified but truthful, confessed under oath that she had notarized the loan document without witnessing John's signature, and most devastatingly, she described how Serena had manipulated John into signing the postnuptial agreement using substituted pages. The courtroom gasped. Serena's attorney tried to object, but Vance delivered the final emotional blow. "Your Honor, we have heard testimony proving deceit, forgery, and financial misappropriation. But to understand the true malice, the destructive intent of Miss Serena, the court must hear from the victim she has silenced. Vance requested permission to call John to the stand, knowing this was the most crucial moment. John, appearing gaunt but resolute, walked into the courtroom. His unexpected arrival was met with a low murmur, and Serena's jaw dropped in disbelief. John took the stand and spoke with quiet, unwavering clarity. He confirmed that he was protected by his mother, not controlled by her. He admitted to his blindness and shame, but then he looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," John said, his voice ringing with conviction, "I confirm that my signature on the loan document was forged, and I confirm that my wife celebrated the premature death of my father and then used my grief and trust to steal the wealth he left me. I ask this court to protect my mother, protect my inheritance, and stop this woman from ever doing this to anyone else." John's testimony, the final undeniable admission of victimhood from the son himself, sealed Serena's fate. The judge called an immediate recess. When the court returned, the ruling was swift and severe. The ruling, trusteeship, Serena, was immediately removed as the interim trustee. Emery was reinstated as the sole primary trustee, effective immediately. Asset sales. The vindictive sale of Emery's home was permanently halted, and the previous distressed property sales were voided, pending a full forensic investigation into Serena's shell companies. The divorce, the post-nuptial agreement, was deemed void due to fraud in the inducement and execution. The divorce would proceed, but the assets would be divided based on prenuptial laws, leaving Serena with minimal marital assets and nothing from the family trust. Serena watched the verdict delivered, her face crumbling from manufactured composure into sheer, naked defeat. She had lost everything, the power, the money, and the final chance at a quick escape. The justice system, set in motion by a mother's fierce love and foresight, had prevailed. After the hearing, John walked over to me. He didn't speak of money or legal papers, he just took my hands. "Welcome back, Mom," he whispered. The golden boy was wounded, but he was finally home. The years of betrayal and legal battles had been brutal, but the core message remained: never do wrong to a good person, especially not a mother. Serena's greed and malice were eventually met by the unyielding force of truth and nature's retribution. She was now left with only the shame of her exposed crimes, while the family's legacy was safe. They say the path to true forgiveness is long, and John and I still have much healing to do, but standing here, safe in the home she tried to steal, I know we survived. We fought the darkness, and the light, the fierce, unyielding light of a mother's love, finally won. If Emery's harrowing journey of betrayal, resilience, and final triumph moved you, please give this video a like. Every like helps share this message of justice and hope. A comment below and share your thoughts on Serena's ultimate downfall. If you believe that karma always catches up to those who do wrong, drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Serena's ultimate downfall. And if you want to see more powerful, emotional, true stories that prove that a mother's love always wins, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell.